the quadratic formula can be used to solve any quadratic equation. Now, the formula itself might look a bit complicated, but it is pretty easy to use, so just follow along. All right. Now, it requires that our equation be written in standard form, circled below. All right. Now, if I look at the example that I have in number 1, that example is actually not written in standard form because it's not set equal to 0 the way that the one in my bottom left is. So the way that I'm going to fix that is just by subtracting 14 from both sides of this equation, and that sets it equal to 0. All right. Once I've done that, that part is important because now it allows me to identify what A, B, and C are. Once I know what A, B, and C are, I can go ahead and substitute them into this formula, all right? So now looking at the bottom left, the standard form of an equation, we can see that the A is always going to be the coefficient of my x squared term. So in the equation that I have, my A, well, it's invisible, but it's a 1, right? It's the one that's in front of that x squared. My B term is always going to be the coefficient of x. So in this case, that is -5. And the C term is always the constant. So in my equation, the C is going to be -14. Now that we've identified what are A, B, and C, we're going to go ahead and just jump into this formula here and rewrite it using the numbers that we're using for A, B, and C instead of using those variables. All right, so let's get right into it. I'm going to write down x equals -b. So -5, right? My first negative sign came from the negative that's in the formula, and the -5 came from replacing that b with the value of b that we identified in our equation. All right, so I have -5 plus or minus. If you're not sure what that plus minus means, I will go over it in a little bit. The square root of, I'm just following this formula on the left here, right? It says b squared, so my b is -5. It's important you write that -5 in parentheses. So b squared, continuing on with the formula, it says minus 4 times a times c. So I'm going to put all this multiplication in parentheses, all right? 4 times a times c. So my a is 1 and my c is -14. I don't know if you guys can see that, all right? The denominator of all of this is 2a. So 2 times 1, because again, my a term was 1 in this specific equation. And now I just start evaluating. So you can grab your calculator if you want, or you can go ahead and finish it by hand with me. But here we go. X equals -5 is just +5, right? That's the same thing as -1 times -5. Plus or minus the square root of -5 squared is 25. -4 times +1 times -14, all multiplied together, gives me +56. And all that is being divided by 2, well, just 2, because it's 2 times 1, so just 2. All right, simplifying further, under the square root sign, I have 25 plus 56. So this is all going to turn into x equals 5 plus or minus the square root of 81 over 2. All right, now, well, I guess you can make the square root of 81 9 first, but this plus minus situation is what's going to split this expression up into 2 possible solutions. So I'm going to have x equals 5 plus, now the square root of 81 is 9, so I'm going to write 9, 5 plus 9 divided by 2, or x is equal to 5 minus 9 over 2. So again, where this came from, this, let me highlight it in red, this plus or minus symbol right here that I just circled means that I have 2 possible solutions. I'm looking at 5 plus the rest of the situation and then 5 minus the rest of the situation. The square root of 81 is 9, so that's why I turned it into 9 in the 2 expressions below here. All right, I'm going to keep evaluating them to get my 2 possible answers. So I have x equals 5 plus 9 is 14. 14 divided by 2 is 7, so 7 is one possible solution. 5 minus 9 is -4, and -4 divided by 2 is -2. So -2 is my other solution. So my 2 solutions for this quadratic equation are 7 and -2. And now, if I was going to look at that on a graph, you see the graph below, this is that equation graphed. You'll notice that this quadratic will intersect the x-axis, will intersect the x-axis at those 2 points, at 7 and at -2. So the two solutions that we got are the roots of this quadratic. That's where that quadratic, that parabola, is going to intersect the x-axis at. All right, here's our second example. So to use the quadratic formula, remember that we first have to check and see, is our equation written in standard form? And when we look at the equation I have in blue, it does indeed look like the one on the bottom left. So that means that we're good to go and we are ready to identify the a, b, and c so that we can start. All right, so a being the coefficient of x squared, I'm going to write them out this time. So my a in this case is 2. It's the coefficient of x squared. My b value is the coefficient of x, so it is 3 in this case. And my c is always my constant, so it is -2. All right, now that I've got the values, all that I have left to do is substitute and evaluate. So let's go ahead and substitute into this formula right over here. X equals -b, so negative, and my b value is 3. So -3 plus or minus the square root of, now I'm going straight from this formula right here. I'm just replacing all the variables with the values that we wrote. Let me circle it. That we wrote right here. All right, so instead of writing b squared, I'm going to go ahead and write 3 squared because my b value is 3. So I have 3 squared minus 4 times a. My a value is 2 times c, and our c value was -2. All of that is going to be divided by 2 times a, and our a value was 2. All right, now we start to evaluate this, simplify this. X equals -3 plus or minus. Now that we've done one example, I'll go ahead and just simplify the entire expression that's under the square root symbol. So if we simplify all of that, we do 3 squared, and then we subtract it from the product of 4 times 2 times -2. Inside that square root, we're going to get 25. All right, and all of that is over 2 times 2, which is 4. So now remember that plus or minus symbol is where we're going to split this up into our 2 possible solutions. So I'm going to have x equals -3 plus, the square root of 25 is 5, so -3 plus 5 divided by 4. And then I'm going to have x equals -3 minus 5 over 4. Oops, sorry, you guys don't see that part. All right, there we go. And now evaluate to get our final answers. X equals -3 plus 5 is 2. 2 divided by 4 is 1/2. So there's one of our answers. And then on the right side, -3 minus 5 is -8. -8 divided by 4 is -2. So there is my other solution. So 1/2 and -2 are the 2 solutions for this quadratic equation. Now, again, if we connect it to graphing, down below I have the graph of this, and you'll notice that it intersects the x-axis at -2 and 1/2, right? This is going by, there's 1 right there, so there is 1/2. Okay, and that is how you use the quadratic formula to solve quadratic equations.